Faith Forged Fathers is a podcast focused on navigating fatherhood and growing what God has called us to be as fathers. My name is Matthew Green. I'm a father of 2 young sons, and the mission of this podcast is to provide a wide array of experiences, perspectives, through interviewing guests from all stages of fatherhood. My hope is that we'll all learn together, gain encouragement and wisdom along the way. Thanks for listening. Welcome to this episode of Faith Forged Fathers. Today, I have a really special guest, a childhood friend back to 4th grade. Matt Lanctot is with me today. Him and I go back so far, and we were just talking before we hit record that we haven't had a face-to-face conversation since we were, I think Matt said probably 16.
Yeah.
I'm mid-30s now, or I guess early 30s. So 16 years ago almost that it's been. So really happy to have him on the podcast. Him and I have been connecting over the last couple of weeks. Been excited to have him on. Matt's been a huge supporter of the podcast since it started. So really grateful to have him on as a guest. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
That's an honor. I appreciate you extending the invite. I know I just kind of texted you out of the whim and was just like, hey, I think that I want to step out of my comfort zone, and kind of get on here and kind of give the podcast a shout out because, like you said, I've been here since day one. I don't always get to listen to your episodes, but I kind of reached out a couple weeks ago and was just like, hey, I really appreciate the Facebook Reels. Just because I don't have a lot of time to sit down and devote to some of the podcast itself. So I really do appreciate everything that you're doing here, man.
No, I love it. I'm glad that you reached out. I always appreciate people, kind of proactively letting me know. And so, just kind of get kicked off. Would love to hear, kind of your testimony. I mean, I know, like you said, we go way back from a friendship standpoint, but I really don't know a whole lot from kind of the faith journey that you've been on. So I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, it kind of just started. I grew up Catholic, just growing up in the Catholicism, and so I mean, I've always went to church every Sunday, 8:30 mass. And so I just always had like an inkling, like there was something more, right? And so not saying there's nothing wrong with the Catholic Church or anything like that. For me personally. And so like I knew once, as I was growing up, when I went to go visit my mom in Virginia one year, because they were divorced. And so um, we ended up just going to one of her church, which is a non-denomination church. And I just remember, I think I was either 5th or 6th grade, and I was just like, man, this church is awesome, right? They got like live band music. It's like a rock show. And honestly, it was just like, that's kind of like what started turning the wheels. I mean, there's a lot of tidbits too that within the Catholic Church that really, made me ask a lot of questions and like confirm, like going through confirmation and confirming my faith in that aspect. But it really never got down to, okay, let's read the Word kind of every day and kind of get into those nitty gritty details. And so kind of just went back and forth, kind of, you're doing the whole high school, junior high, high school thing. And then I ended up, my mom moved to Pennsylvania where she married her now husband. And so my stepdad and her live out in Pennsylvania. And so they have what's in the Agape Farms out there. It's called Creation East. And there's also a Creation West out in Seattle, but in Pennsylvania, so we had tickets, and I think, who was it? There was just a lot of like Christian rock bands, because I didn't realize when you think of, music, you think of like hymns, old time songs and whatnot. And so I was like, wow, this is actually like good music that I'm listening to, like kind of like the same thing, like your Linkin Park and stuff like that. And so I was
Sure.
just like, wow, this is just, amazing. And so I kind of got the wheels turning there too. Then you got kind of come back to high school and just kind of do the high school thing. And then honestly, it really just kind of turned into when I met my wife. And so in college. And so then we kind of agreed that, faith was a big thing. And so just to see, have a relationship with that. And so we kind of decided, hey, we're going to go find a church on our own, because she didn't want to be Catholic. Well, neither did I. And so it kind of worked out in both our favors. And so we just kind of like church hopped for a little bit, and then we kind of found home at our church home. And then we just kind of, grew from there. And then like, honestly, it wasn't, I want to say it wasn't like stagnant, But honestly, it was just more of, it just didn't go anywhere. You always like, oh, you pray for things, but I've always thought that, honestly, it's just um, like there's other people in the world that are going through way much more than I am. I'm not
Hmm.
even gonna bother and bother and praying because God doesn't really want to hear from me. I mean, obviously that's not the case as you continue to grow in your faith, and so kind of just like took a back burner. And then honestly it's just more of a as of late. So like my wife's mom passed away a couple years ago, and so she has just been hit with a whole bunch of like things that are just thrown at her for faith wise. And honestly her faith has grown tremendously. And not to say that it's not a bad thing, but she dragged me with her. And so like I see where she is gone and going with her faith, and it's more of I don't want to be left behind. And so it's more of now we're doing kind of like talk to each other, and like now we're doing like couple Bible studies and just kind of like say, hey, I don't really know the books of the Bible really well. And so we kind of got a Bible study that we purchased offline. And I mean, we're kind of going through that. So, I mean, it's growing every day. It's getting stronger. I kind of don't care. You like when you're growing up, you don't want to be, I guess, in layman's terms, like you don't want to be that faith kid, which is the weirdest things because oh, you go to church and you care about God and all this stuff, and as you get older, you just really don't care. Like I don't I don't know. I mean, it's it's just like something's turning. And it's just like I guess it's just more maturing in the faith, right? Too. So
Sure. So when you referenced earlier, you kind of like went back to doing high school things. Was that kind of were you kind of alluding to like kind of faith got set aside kind of in those high school years?
yeah, yeah. I mean, like you're partying and drinking. I mean, not drinking,
Yeah.
but you're partying and you're having a good time, and you really, you're not really in the Word every day because you when you're a teenager, you kind of think, I'm invincible.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's pretty interesting how I mean like the Bible's pretty clear on like it's just a matter of when we'll face trials and we'll face difficult times. There's no promises of once you become a Christian, it's like it's smooth sailing from here. A lot of times, it's actually quite the opposite because it's like,
Absolutely.
that's when you kind of you come into focus for the enemy. It's like, okay, like that's who I need to take out. And so I know you mentioned like your wife going through some tough times. Like were y'all growing before kind of I guess the tough times came, or was it just like, hey, something rough is happening right now, I don't know what else to do, I need to go to my Bible, like kind of what was that? Because I'm actually really impressed to hear that y'all went from kind of like that, maybe like that stagnant lukewarm place to leaning in, versus like that's typically I think a place where a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm out. So I think that's really cool. I'd love to kind of hear more about like what prompted you guys to lean into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, she's been more involved in her faith more than I have, and so like it kind of brings back to like the faith journey. It kind of ties into the financial aspect of it too, because like we when we first got married, there's been faith aspects, and so like we kind of when we first got married, we ended up buying a foreclosure, and the foreclosure was on the market for 2 years, and we kind of walk in, and we're like, what's wrong with this? All it needed is a new coat of paint. And so then, kind of we bought that, and then it kind of turns into where we're getting ready and we're like, hey, we really want to save up money because we really want to get out of debt. And so then we're getting ready to transition because my dad owns a home in the nearby town that I grew up in. And we're like, hey, can we just rent from you, sell our home, pay off some of our debts, and just, we'll live in your house for like a year. I mean, he wasn't living there, but it was just, and then at the same time, our church came forward and was just like, hey, we were really thinking of you for like the worship arts assistant. And it ended up coming with like a 50% pay cut. And so it was
Hmm.
just like, okay, that's a stretch. It's going to be a faith stretch, and our family, and how are we going to maintain it? And I remember having a conversation with her, and she was just like, should we do it? And she was like looking to me as the voice of reason, and I was like, why not? No hesitation. I was just like, well, why not? We'll be okay. And then I remember her telling me, she was saying, you know, God, I trust you. And then he replied, kind of, do you really? And it was just kind of like a shocker moment. And she was just like, oh man, that's, I guess, okay, let's do this. And so, I mean, she's and whatnot. And so like you make, made that step. But she's always been, you know, foundationally there. And so she kind of dived in because working for the church. And so I was just more like the kind of like the stagnant, like, I'd go to like the men's groups and I'd be like, hey, how are you? Yeah, we need to read our Bibles. Yep, cool.
Hmm.
And whatnot. And it's just, I still feel like sometimes when you just kind of you go to church on Sunday and that's about it. And so I'm trying to break away from that, and I'm trying to move forward to just not a Christian on Sunday to a Christian every day. And,
It's interesting you said that because so I went on a run last night, and it was I wouldn't even call it a run. It was like a really slow, borderline walk. It was embarrassing, but like in the middle of it, I was like, our faith is so similar to our physical fitness, and in terms of like I used to be able to go out and do 10 miles piece of cake. No, not a big deal. And then to go out and like be struggling on a mile, I was like, it just shows like a lack of consistency and a lack of discipline and a lack of me just like showing up. And I was like, our faith is the same exact way. If we're not consistently showing up and we're not, just building that rhythm and routine, then yeah, like, our faith muscles atrophy, and it becomes where like, if you feel distant, you wonder why you don't hear things. And I was reading through James, I think it's James 4 the other day, and it says like, if you draw near to God, he'll draw near to you. So like it takes that initial step from us to draw near so we can feel him draw near. But like that nearness comes from, us kind of consistently leaning in. So I resonate with you a ton because like sometimes when things get busy and I get like stressed, like typically for some reason, like my carving out time to read is something that I don't know why will go first. And I'm reading another book called The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. And I think it's really interesting in it. He says, like God is a person. God has a personality. You don't learn a person and their personality through one interaction, right? Like you don't ever get to know someone fully by interacting with them once or even twice or three times. It's, constantly spending time with somebody. And so, yeah, I'm fully aligned with like, you know, sometimes like you can feel super fired up after a service and then you wake up Monday morning and you're like, all right, it's just another day, versus kind of carrying it through the rest of the week.
yeah, I mean, for sure, it's an everyday process, and like I'm big into, well, was big into working out until my shoulder issues. But
Do you want
um,
to share the story?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, so like my son plays hockey, and so I was getting ready to join a men's league too, just to, because I've never, my dad we couldn't afford it growing up, and so I've always loved the game of hockey, and so I was like, I played roller hockey as a kid in the street with my friends and around the kids in the neighborhood, and I was like, you know what, I'm really gonna do it. Got my son into hockey, he plays hockey, and I was all right. So I finally bought all the equipment, and then we went to open public skate, and I ended up tripping over my own 2 feet, kind of like transitioning from skating forwards to skating backwards, and then ended up dislocating my left shoulder. And
Man.
so,
So it wasn't one of like those crazy kids with the PVC pipes that they didn't hit you in the back of the.
oh,
Do kids use those up north? I mean, you guys are probably all like born to ice skate. Down here, like they have like those little crazy, little PVC builds that the kids run into the back of your skates with and take you out.
oh no, no. Well, no, yeah, they have that as a walker PVC pipe kind of thing,
Yeah.
like on the ice, and so. Yeah, and so I have all this fresh equipment, and I have an orthopedic surgeon consult tomorrow. So hopefully no surgery. So it's not going to be fun.
So is the plan to bounce back? Are you going to get back out there?
Yeah, I'm gonna listen to the doctors and be like, hey, when can I get back out there and skate and because I really wanna play game, even though I think I'm better than I really am. It's one of those childhood things where I'm the best, and then you get out there and you're like, I'm not the best.
I'm 30 now. My back's sore.
Yeah, no, tell me about it, dude. The shoulder. So, but I mean, yeah, it's like, I mean, 'cause to kind of like back on topic, I mean, it's crazy how like especially like men. I feel that we don't necessarily, and I think the movement, if you want to call it a movement, is more like men reaching out to men a lot. And I know I'm very good at reaching out to people who are like, trying kind of like maybe going through a hard time and just kind of like, hey, you know, I appreciate you, and just sending them messages. And if I find out that one of my friends is struggling on Facebook, I kind of reach out individually and just be like, hey, brother, I'm thinking about you. And there was one of my friends, he was struggling, and I think it was the song NF Happy from NF, and it was just like, this song made me think of you, just because you told me about your struggles with kind of like depression and whatnot. And I think as men, we all think alike sometimes, and we're just
Mhm.
afraid of like, hey, I'm the only one going through this, so I'm not going to talk about it. And I think as we're getting older and kind of developing relationships through podcasts like yours, we find out that, hey, we're actually pretty similar to a lot of each other. And so we have a lot of things in common. And so, like, I know we were talking about it beforehand, but it's super resonating. And whether that's the right word or not, my wife always makes fun of me, like, you just pull out words. and and so, but to have a friendship like ours, where we can not see each other from 16, and to see you walking in faith the way that you were walking in faith, and kind of like how I'm trying to do the same thing, it's just kind of like makes me miss being in Texas, because it's like you kind of think of, man, what type of relationship would we have if we're, still in person, going out to eat, our families be intertwined, and it's just like, our kids be best friends, and it's just like, man, just if the what ifs, right?
Sure.
But then, I'm super thankful for technology, like I said before we started, and it was just like, because I feel like we haven't really missed a beat.
Agreed.
And,
I feel
and
like it's like as soon as I saw your face, it felt like it was like a familiar conversation again.
well, yeah, I mean, I've seen your face just because I've seen the podcast, but
Too much in my face. Right?
no, and so, but and it's just the way that the technology is these days, and you like reaching out to different men, different age groups. I think it's just, honestly, it's just truly amazing, because like, we're all struggling, whether it's one thing or another, and it's not to be silent is kind of what we need to do. So
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you. I think a lot of times it's like we assume that just like in order for us to like share our stories, like and for it to resonate, somebody must be going through like the exact same thing, like one for one kind of thing. And one of the things that I thought was really cool, even about my very first episode that I did, where I kind of shared some of my struggles that I went through, just from like going through like hormonal kind of stuff with actually like treating my tumor, getting testosterone in my system, all those kind of things, and like the repercussions, kind of the fallout from it. And I had people reach out that were like, dude, like, one, I didn't know. I wish I would have known. But two, like, I'm going through something right now too. And it was like, in a sense, like, sometimes they were like completely unrelated. Like, they didn't have a pituitary tumor and need this and this and this, but they were like, but I'm going through a really tough time that I'm getting tested. And like, can we sync up? Can we chat? Can we like whatever it may be? But I think just the simple fact of knowing somebody is going through something and realizing that we all need to kind of walk through this together is so big. And so I think that that's cool. That you proactively reach out to people. One of the things that I think is kind of cool that you've mentioned twice is one, when you were younger, music resonated highly with you. I think it's cool now to hear like when you're reaching out to people, music's kind of part of that as well. You were a big percussion guy, right? You were a drummer growing up.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So is that kind of? Do you think is music just something that naturally is like something that resonates with you, and like a way? I mean, in a way, it's kind of that's um, I think a gift. You're able to like, like I know this song that I really think could speak to you in this season. Do you feel like your music background lends itself to that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought of it that way, to be fair. I just kind of, just kind of hits me, and it's like I just feel, you just kind of feel, you know, I need to reach out to this person, and I'd rather not be like, hey, like because you hear stories and you don't necessarily want to think about the negative, and you'd be like, oh, I wish I would have reached out to that person because that could have been the what if, and so I just kind of like I don't necessarily hesitate, but if I think of you, a lot of times I shoot you a message. I don't know how many times I've just randomly thought of you, right, and just shot you a text message and been like, hey, I need just it could have been what for whatever, I can't really remember right now, but I think it was like a couple questions just about faith in general, right, and like how do you start reading the Bible, because it was just, or like where do you start, and I mean even to this day there's really, you just gotta just open it. But but to your question, I mean, I think it's just just following what sort of feelings that you have going on, right, and be like, hey, because you never know.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, and a lot of times, like you've even sent me just like encouraging messages. Like, I know you sent me a couple, kind of to your point, like maybe asking me a couple questions, but then they've just sent me like an encouraging text that would like came at just the right time. So I think with that's the kind of the Holy Spirit kind of giving you some nudges to kind of proactively reach out to people. I think it's
Yeah.
really cool that kind of the obedience and listening to it and just being like, all right, like cool, like let's fire this bad boy off. But
Yeah.
one thing I want to make sure that we get to, and we spend some time talking to you, something that you mentioned, kind of tithing and giving, and something is a topic that is kind of near and dear, and a really impactful part of y'all's story. Kind of want to kind of kick it off, kind of like what maybe what kind of prompted that being kind of a big area of focus for y'all.
For sure. And so it kind of all originated from like our church, like a church-wide focus that we did. And so it kind of like we just did like a church-wide focus of like reading this book from Robert Morris, The Blessed Life. And so basically it's just like extraordinary giving and being like extraordinarily generous. And so like when we first started going to the church, I was giving, I want to say 3%. I would say our like 3% tithe in quotations, because tithe means 10. But and so I always thought, I was like, oh cool, I'm giving 3%. I'm making up the 7% by volunteering in the church, whether it's volunteering with the youth, volunteering with the lights, volunteering with the men's group. And so I kind of like, oh, that'll take up my 7%. Well, we did this church-wide focus. Man, dude, totally wrong. And so it's just like, you start looking into like what tithe means, and specifically, it means 10%, first 10, like your first fruits. And so, you know, we made the decision as a family that, we're going to jump right in, right? And like the blessed life like talks about like sacrificial giving. And so we jumped right in. We're like, hey, we're going to go from 3%, 10%. And I mean, it definitely was a lot more money, and so it really was that sacrifice, that sacrifice, and so then it was just there, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the month, after their first month of doing 10%, I looked at my bank account and I was like, we have about the same amount of money left over, and I was just like in awe, like how is that even possible? Like what happened? How did what? And you're just asking questions. And so then it's just, we've always given 10%. And then we've kind of had the conversation of like, do we give 10% gross? Do we give 10% net? Well, if you have the conversation of, okay, if you give 10% gross, do you have to give if you get a tax return? You know,
Yeah,
like,
it's rabbit hole, right?
yeah. And so I've always just done, from my own opinion, I've just done 10% gross. and it makes it easy. And so that way I don't have to worry about if taxes fluctuate or whatnot. And, I know
Sure.
what I make, and then this is it. And then, you start going and you get a tax return, and then you get 10% off your tax return. And even though you've already technically tithed off of that income that you're getting back from the government, it's still unexpected. And so, we want to, we want to tithe off of that. And so I've always just been very, like, I think this is where I've grown most in my faith, and just been like, nope, we're doing it. We're giving. And so, like, we sold our foreclosure home, or the house that we bought that was a foreclosure, and we made a good amount of money. And so we tithed off of that. And so that one hurt, like it didn't hurt, but it was very like a sacrifice, because I think the tithe was 5 digits, and it was just like, that's a lot of money. And so, it's a lot. And so we have kind of embraced the tithe and the sacrifice. And so, not to say, like, and I don't want to, like, discourage people and say, oh, I'm not giving 10%, so I'm not, living up to the expectations of God. As long as you're, like, you're making that sacrifice, your sacrifice could be 1%, because that's everything that you have. Just make sure that it is a sacrifice. And so, I don't want to take away from anybody if they're not, giving that 10%, but just, kind of just moving forward. And yeah, and it's just kind of everything. It's been like the stepping stone for kind of what we do. And just, I've faithfully given every single paycheck, and I look forward to this time of year, because I love getting the church report of seeing the amount of money. Like, wow, look how much we gave this year. That's amazing. And just to see, what has, and it's kind of like a time of reflection of, we gave faithfully and, generously to the church and other charities across the board for your giving. And to see how God, and like, it's just like a New Year's reflection of the previous year, and kind of like move forward, like look back and just like think of everything that God's blessed me with. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it is. So,
No, I love that a lot. So was there any like one particular like key takeaway from that book that really like rocked you the most, or was it just kind of like it in its entirety, or was there like that one kind of moment where you're like, oh man, like my 7%'s gotta change?
yeah, well, I mean, because like he's coming out with a couple books, and so like the Blessed Life is about, giving generously, and it kind of talks about where he heard God tell him to empty his 401k, and he'll tell you, and he'll double it within like the next 2 years. And it was just like, that rocked me, because I'm just like, I don't know if I could do that. To seriously, like, I would have to, you know, really not contemplate, but to really like pray about it and be like, is this really what you're saying? And so to fully trust God in that way. And then he has another book that's beyond. It's called Beyond Blessed, and it's kind of more targeted to like the individual, like giving stories and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the whole book kind of rocked. I kind of want to read it again. So
Yes, it's probably one of those ones when you take another pass through it, like more stuff will jump off the page than the first time you went through it.
yeah,
I know for me personally, I think finances were one of the things that I like resisted the longest. And thankful to my wife that she was just like, nope, this is something we've got to do and we're gonna do. Because like I was always like, man, I've been working so hard. I got these degrees. I got this job. Look at all this money. I'm man, this is great. Look at all this hard work. And then she's like, that's not yours, And then it took a long time for me. It took a couple like really big shakeups career wise for me to finally get like my identity out of my title and any of that kind of stuff. But like once, to your point, like I had to set it on auto draft, because if I didn't set it on auto draft, I wouldn't do it. I'd be really sloppy with it. If every, 2 weeks came around and I didn't like just have it yanked out on my own, I'd probably be like, oh, next week I'll just, I'll catch up. And so, it took for, a little while me being sloppy about it. And then me finally just being like, all right, we're going to set this thing. I know what it needs to be. I'm salaried. It makes it easy. Right. And just go. And then to your point, like I never found it's like, oh man, like if only we had, X dollars back, we'd be able to live a decent life. Like it was almost the opposite. Like you just like I am so happy that that's a part of our life. And like we had a similar kind of situation where we flipped a house a couple years ago, and when we got, we did well, and we were able to take 10% of our profit from doing that, and we were like, let's just bless other people with it. And so we were just like able to give people like food gift cards and gas cards and like just things like that like and you do it all in the name of Jesus, right? And like this is like none of this is mine. That's why I'm giving this all away. Like it's not mine. Like I don't deserve this. Like you guys do. And so it's just like such a mental shift, because for the longest time I was like, probably was it like Scrooge McDuck or something? Who's the guy from DuckTales? Who was like the big vault of that was me. I didn't have that money. There were no gold coins in there though. But it was just kind of like, no, this is mine. This is mine. And then you finally just kind of like, no, this isn't mine. Like I need. It's just a real big heart shift.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm not saying it's wrong, but you should. I personally, I don't have it to auto tithe,
Hmm.
and that's just personal preference. Is like I remember like when I get paid, because I get paid every other week, and I just, because I want that physical action, because I don't want it to set it and forget it.
Sure.
And so I personally just don't want to. I want to remember and be like, boom, I'm giving this to you, God. And then it's like a different transaction. It's like I'm a big Dave Ramsey supporter, and so like it's like when you pay with cash, you kind of just want to like hold on to it. And so, but it's just like more of like when you tithe, then you click that give button. It's just kind of like I'm leaving it with an open hand. And so
Nice.
that's just my view, right? So
No, I think that I can totally see how like there's like that impactful piece of that, each time. No, that's a good point. I mean, you're a little bit more
yeah,
disciplined
I
than
mean,
me.
there'll be times though where I'll be like, I'll be looking through because I budget every month, right? And I use Dave Ramsey's, no, shameless plug, every dollar app for him. And and it's I have that tithe, and there'd be times where I'm like, why is that tithe budget not full? And I'll go back and I'll be like, whoops, I forgot to tithe, and then I go and tithe immediately, to make sure, because that's what my budget said,
Sure.
and so, but yeah, I mean that's and to your point about doing the gift cards and the groceries, like I totally want to do that one day and just be like have like save $500 as a budget line item and just say, hey, every time we go to the grocery, I'm just gonna go find some random person and just say, hey, here's $100, God sees you, and just walk away.
Hmm.
And just like or just pay for. I know it's like that pay for you behind you in the drive-through, but I mean, I personally I don't like going through drive-throughs. I'd rather get out and walk up to somebody instead of talk to the microphone, in so to speak. But but yeah, it's just I can't wait for the day that I can just use God's money and bless other people substantially. I'm not saying I can't bless with the money that I have now, because we try to do the best what we can.
That's cool. So what drew you to Ramsey? Kind of curious.
Yeah, so I mean, I was trying to do the budget thing on my own, and then I think somebody randomly at our church, because we did the Financial Peace University, they were like, hey, do you want to be a coordinator, or do you want to be like a team lead? And I was like, never taken it, and I'm not going to listen to somebody who's gone bankrupt twice, And so like I was very like Dave Ramsey negative. And so then like we started going through it, and then we started actually like paying attention to like his philosophy. And honestly, I mean, it's game changing. And like I for a while was a certified coach for Dave Ramsey for like a month. For like a month or so, just because I wanted to be that financial coach, because I thought that was kind of like where of the gifting that I had. I mean, I still have the gifting, so I still do like the Financial Peace University. It's just more not on like the one-on-one level, because
Hmm.
when you come to finances, people don't necessarily want to talk about hey, I'm in mountains of debt. I don't know what to do. I screwed up. But yeah, I mean, it was just more of kind of getting back, coordinating that class for the first time, and then kind of just going through the principles and learning them ourselves. And then so then it was just like, okay, let's put it into action. And then push comes to shove, we're debt free, and then we ended up, building a house. And so now we're, debt free besides the mortgage, and so it's just like to have the the freedom of to kind of do with my money, and being able to, give freely, if God asked me to, and give generously, kind of like where this a stepping stone of my faith, and kind of like, move forward that way. And so I'm always Dave Ramsey plus, and just, I talk about him all the time, and try to bring him in and be like, hey, you like budget. You definitely need to do a budget, whether you listen to Dave Ramsey or not. You definitely need to do a budget. So
Sure. No, it's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. So like I've got the total money makeover. I've got a couple different I guess philosophies back here. So I've got like Rich Dad Poor Dad, which kind of is a little bit opposite of. So Dave is, I think he's got a lot of good stuff for sure. And I think his budgeting approach is really good. I like the kind of the zero based budgeting. I think is a good place to start from that front. And I think
yeah.
even just kind of having a giving heart and a giving mindset. I think really does. It's one of those, like, our kids are always watching, and so I think
Mhm.
when they see us, not walking around like tight fisted on all of our belongings and stuff like that. I think that really kind of sets a good tone um, for them too, because like their default position is, how do I give and bless others versus how do I hoard and accumulate.
Oh yeah, I mean, and for sure, and that's like kind of like the whole point of like being a father too, and you're kind of using God's money and being a good steward of your money. And so then you kind of have those conversations with your kids, and you're just like, hey, we can't, not necessarily afford it, but it's just like it's not in our budget. And so you kind of do that, the staple stone, the staple of, hey, you have $10, let's go to Target and you can buy $10 worth of stuff. And to kind of go through that and go through the aisle and be like, oh, well, that's $15, you can't have that. Or that's $7 and $4 that adds up to $11. You don't have enough money to buy that. And kind of like teach our kids how to kind of budget subconsciously, without actually, making it not fun. Although I think I'm a finance nerd, so budgeting to me is fun. I'll sit there and look at my budget on a daily basis, just being like, yep, scrolling through. Okay, we're good to go. But I think it's a staple to start teaching your kids too, to budget and finances, at a young age too. And I mean, it's, we do it subconsciously when you kind of, hey, you have $10 to go buy mom and dad a Christmas present from the school, when they have the Santa's workshop that comes into the school. And so, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's, then you can kind of show them, hey, we're gonna give, not like our money, but let's, kids don't necessarily have money, but they have toys. So we can go, hey, we're going to go give your toys
Mm.
to some other kids, and then that way you can kind of, pick out your best toy, and we can kind of go and do that. Or hey, we're going to go hand out lunches, with the church, on, because like our church does, during the summertime they do, lunches for some of the kids that, don't necessarily get to have that make sure that all the kids get to eat, during the summer. And so, to have our kids go help out hand lunches, and it's a way of serving, and to make sure that we're serving in the ways that we can.
No, I think that's super cool. Yeah, I think one of the things that I found really interesting with like money and kids is like it helps so much with teaching delayed gratification, right? Because I think it's so often like that's $10. I have $10, therefore I should buy it. And you're like, whoa, 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 like one, like like trying to teach the difference between want and need, right? Because kids always say, "I need that." I'm like, do you need that or do you want that? 'Cause that's a big difference. And then two, it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And then like once you get it, one, how long are you actually gonna play with that thing? Or are you just like do you just want the satisfaction of walking up to the register, and then like we won't get it. And we'll go over a couple aisles, and like one of my kids will say like a big Lego, right? And it's like $30 or whatever it is. Or granted, Legos is like a $300. Legos are ridiculous, but and I'm like, yeah, like, well, if you would have pulled the trigger on that thing over there, like you would have had zero. But now you have an opportunity to save. And like, well, how do I save? Oh, you gotta, what do you get for your chores, right? Like, I get this per chore. Like, well, let's sit down and do the math and see how many chores do you need to, like, and then it becomes like a math problem and like something they can work for and work towards. And now they have a plan and they're saving, and there's something that they have to do and trade and sacrifice to finally like get to the thing. And sometimes they'll be like, well, now that I've like accumulated all this, like I don't want to just spend it. I want to and like we have a cool book from a bank, like a local bank here. Like I was in doing something for real estate, and they saw my son was with me, and they gave him a book, and it was the Three Little Pigs, but it was about was it saving, giving, and spending, or no, saving, yeah, something to that effect. So the Three Little Pigs in this case learn that they're really good at building brick houses. So they start a brick house building company for all the other animals. And so they become entrepreneurs, and like they start getting all this cash flow from building brick homes for all the other animals to basically run the wolf out of town. And so like now that we have all this, what do we do? Like, well, we should save some of it. We should, give some of it. We should invest some of it, and it was just kind of a cool book of just like, how do you, be really proactive and manage your money. And it was like geared towards a kid's story, which I thought was kind of cool. But I don't know how I got on that, but it was neat.
Well, it's money, and it's a money story. So, and I mean, that's kind of what we, look for. And it was funny because yesterday I went to go watch, because I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. And so I
Sorry,
went
everybody.
to go, and so I went to go, the Packers were on TV and, on our local channels. And so I, had to go to like a restaurant to go, just to go watch it. And so like I pulled out of the driveway, not even asking. And so and then all of a sudden my wife texts me and she goes, "Hey, he wants to come with you." And I was like, "Okay." And so I turned around and pulled back in, and it was just driving to this restaurant. And I looked in the rearview mirror, and he's just like, and it's just like, you look as a father, and you just like, those little moments where it's just like, I would have just left to go to the restaurant to go with my dad, and I would have left my son, and it was just like, oh wow, yeah, I didn't even think about, asking my son if he wanted to go. And so it was just like, I was super glad, and he had a blast. I remember when we got there, he was just like, "I thought we were gonna go to the stadium," and I'm like, "Nah, buddy."
Nope.
Nah.
Not
So, but I
quite.
mean, and it's those little tidbits too, of being like, a dad and a father. And like I live my days to make them smile, right? Obviously, I have to discipline them, and when they do and correct their incorrect behavior, but like, it's just, I literally try to sit and cherish every single moment, and just be like I've seen so many videos on Facebook and whatnot, and I just like, you know what, that's right. It's gonna be gone before you know it. It's like, one thing that bothers me the most is when we're driving in the car and the windows get fogged up, and and they're making smiley faces in the foggy, and they're getting like that fingerprints all over it, and I'm just like, like, I've seen a video, and it's like, one day it's gonna be gone where they're not gonna do that, and you're gonna miss it. And so it's just like, you know what? Let them be kids. Because I remember making baby feet on the windows, with your
Mm-hmm.
with your palm. Showed them how to do that the other day. They were just loving that one.
That's cool.
And so, it's just, and that's kind of how, like the faith, to tie it back to kind of faith though, is I was kind of going at it a day by day, but I really, want to start incorporating and not just leaving it to my wife to do those faith acts, and like, kind of like, hey, let's read the Bible, or what did you learn in children's church today, and kind of like be the leader. And so, that's kind of why, like even I remember, messaging you and I was like, hey, this is like a big thing for me because I don't normally, openly talk about, like my faith and how it's like, you know, changed my life and kind of moving forward. And so it's just kind of like really stepping out of my comfort zone to sit here and kind of talk about it. I mean, even though it is, friendly face, right? It's still, like nervous and whatnot. But I mean, because like deep down, I have some fears and anxieties, because it's just like as I said a little bit earlier, like my wife, I feel like my wife is so farther ahead in her faith journey, and like I'm so far behind, and that I need to do more things as a leader because she's doing some of these things that she's not actually called to do, and it's like when you start digging in on a daily basis, and you're like, wow, I really need to start picking it up. So kind of went on a tangent. So
No, man, I totally like resonate, man. Like that was especially like when we were engaged, like even before kids and before marriage. The idea of leading somebody so much further ahead of me was like so intimidating. And I would say in a lot of ways, Erica's still ahead of me. She's a better, I think, um, applicator of like the word than me. Like I probably, I don't know. I don't do is always do a good job of like, be slow to anger. I don't do that one well. And she's like she has a lot of grace and shows like she's just I think it does a better job of that. But like I think over the years, and I'm saying this more of just like as encouragement, um, it's like I've found that it's not about how much you know, but how you create the environment for your family to thrive, right? Like in a way, it's like how do you set up your wife to just continue just to stay on fire, right? And for you to be like, I'm so ready. Like I'm gonna do everything I can to catch you, but I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that you just keep on rocking, right? And I'm gonna in the process, I'm bringing my kids with me, right? Because they're gonna follow me, they're gonna be following mom. Um, but yeah, man, I think you stepping out in faith and you being, I mean, this is super courageous. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm super nervous every go at this because like I'm scared I'm gonna say something wrong, right? And someone's just gonna text me and be like, "Hey, man, like that was like theologically just wrong," and like so like I'm always like really really sensitive to like what I say, because I'm just scared because like I'm growing and learning. And that's why episode one, like I'm no theologian, right? If you're coming for like deep theological knowledge, I'm not your guy because I'm learning. Like I'm growing day to day, and I have days where I don't pick this thing up when I should. But the closer we keep it to us, the more time open it becomes. And so, I mean, I think you're crushing it. Um, I I was kind of curious. You mentioned that you're in men's groups. Has that been something that you've found encouraging, and kind of like helping, kind of get your rhythm going?
yeah, so I mean, like there was a men's group at our church for a while, and then it kind of fizzled out. And so it's just I've been thinking about kind of like starting it up like again, just because you always it's funny because you always be like, man, I wish our church would have this or would have that, and it's just like, well, like you wanted to have a men's group, why don't you lead it? And it's just like, oh no, can't do that, can't do that. And so I've been thinking about it and maybe doing like, hey, kind of like opening up as we get farther down and doing it again and do like a Saturday morning breakfast for men, ages 12 and above, and that way kind of just you keep it together, right? And then I've always kind of always wanted like a mentor and whatnot because you have like those elders that kind of like, hey, like, yeah, let's do a Bible study, but then you kind of like do the reverse and you're just like, well, am I doing that to somebody younger to me? Well, the answer was no. And so I'm just like, well, I can't be like mad that nobody's mentoring me if I'm not mentoring anybody else, and it's just like, or kind of like doing like the faith walk journey with them. And so like our church has kind of started like a community group. And so we do community groups weekly. And so we have like we meet on a day of the week, and we kind of just kind of do life together. And so like we kind of like meet and mingle for an hour and a half, and then during that hour and a half we kind of sit and talk about what was the sermon about, and kind of dissect it with a couple of questions, and kind of get you to think about as your faith walk, and you kind of dig down. And dude, I was super skeptical when this first started, obviously, because I don't like to talk about my faith openly, right? But then as you start, the same people come week in and week out, you get comfortable with them. It's just like, we have like just a regular conversation you and I are having. And you start, you start talking about, hey, did you catch the game? Or and then you start, as you get deeper into it, you really start pulling out like, hey, I'm struggling with this, can we
Hmm.
can we talk about it? And so there's some of that happening, and you still have, and it's just amazing to see. And like we just, I think our church just started like the community groups, I want to say like a year or so ago, and it has just been, I mean, it's just been eye opening for me. Like, because it's more of like, oh, it started out with like, oh, do we really have to have community group again tonight? Yeah, man, the community group's coming, kids are coming, and my kids are playing with their kids, and so you're kind of just kind of doing life together.
Yeah, no, community groups have been something that have been just hugely impactful for us. Like we went a long, long time not in community, and we found like us always longing for like that group of people for us to get together with all the time on a regular basis. And so I'm excited to hear that you guys are kind of going down that path, because even at the same time, just like I think there's even like a comfortability. I may have just made up a word too, of like no, like kind of knowing who your kids are playing with, right, and kind of like what kind of household they're growing up in. And I don't know, I love that aspect of it as well personally, just because I'm kind of hypersensitive to that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Um, but so are y'all at a newer church or
No,
that
so
are
the church has been for about 30 or so years.
okay?
And so our founding pastors just recently stepped down to enjoy retirement. And so they've just, it's been like, I think this month is the 1 year anniversary of our new senior pastor kind of
Okay.
being in charge. And so it's been, they still come to church, the senior pastor, or the founding pastors. And so it's just been, like a huge transition, because it's been their church for 30 something years, and then to kind of step down and step back, and kind of like have this different transition period. It's been amazing to see God work within the church, and grow it in different areas, and just to see it flourish is just amazing. And so it's definitely like a testimony of where the founding pastors were, and kind of where we're heading to. And so it's a good foundation.
It's cool. Got like a fresh wind.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. So kind of as we kind of pivot towards kind of wrapping up here, I kind of want to get a little bit more kind of like tactical advice from you. So say someone is sitting here listening, and maybe they don't have a budget, they don't have any kind of like direction on where to go, kind of like from a financial perspective. Like what is your recommend? Like what is your like step one recommendation to that person to like they've got some debt, they don't have a budget, they've got you know so many recurring streaming things that hit, and they don't like. Where do you start? Like, what's your recommendation to that person to kind of help get their finances under control?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm gonna plug. They should be paying me for how many times I plug them, but Dave.
Affiliate link.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. But Dave Ramsey, dude, honestly, I would and do like sign up for like a Financial Peace University, and and so that way, I mean, they're online, and I know it kind of doesn't make sense, because like the Financial Peace University, I think is either, I think it's $100 or it's $129. So I get it, right? You're like, hey, I'm in debt, I'm struggling with money, and you're asking me to pay $129, right? I totally understand. Like, I get it, but it's so life changing. And so it is to get it in order, to get your finances in order. You can talk to like a financial coach within Dave Ramsey. When you pay, I think the membership fee, I think you get one free consultation with a coach. And I mean, it's just that way they teach you how to budget. They teach you, starting out, pay everything off, and just it kind of just forces you to uh, get in line with your money. And so, because like the big thing is Dave Ramsey's like baby step one, if you want to call it, because he has baby steps. He has 7 baby steps, and like baby step one is $1,000 emergency fund, and then if you have $5,000 in your savings account, he wants you to draw it down to 1,000. And people are like, I can't do that. What if I have an emergency? Well, that's why you're supposed to you pay off everything as quickly as possible. You're not supposed to be comfortable when you're paying off debt, because if you're comfortable, then you're going to stay in debt. And that's kind of just like, okay, that makes sense. So I mean, I try to avoid debt at all costs, right? And I know, we're all, things happen, right? You might get into a car accident where you have to go buy a new car, right? But then it's like, if you go into debt, and you just try to pay it off as quickly as possible. So
Cool.
that's personally, that's what honestly I would do. But
Nice, man. Well, good stuff, man. Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on, man. This has really been really fun. I enjoyed getting to just see your face for the last hour, and going all the way back to fourth grade. So kind of full circle. Here we are, dads, husbands, just a couple dudes talking about Jesus, and I think that's pretty awesome. And so, thanks so much for coming on, dude.
yeah, for sure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Faith Forged Fathers podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on whichever podcast platform you're listening from. Subscribe to the podcast, and also head on over to Instagram and follow at Faith Forged Fathers. Thanks again for listening.